In Titus 2, older women are commanded to teach what is good so they can help younger women love their husbands and children. On today's show, you'll hear from older women who will share timeless, relevant biblical wisdom and personal, profound life experiences to help answer your questions and teach what God says is good so you can be the wife and mother you were created to be. Welcome to another episode of Older Women Likewise.
Hello, viewers. We're so glad you've joined us tonight. Isaac Newton once said, "Tact is the art of making a point without making an enemy." So being tactful does not mean disguising what needs to be said. It means presenting your thoughts and ideas in a way that would make them the most inoffensive, the most persuasive, the most appealing. And being tactful is just that, the ability to clearly convey your message while being sensitive with those that you're speaking to, so as to avoid unintentionally offending them. And that is not easy. That is not easy for any of us. And so fortunately, I have a pretty epic couple of panelists tonight with me so that we can all try to help each other think of what to do in some of these awkward situations that require a lot of tact. So Robin, what has been going on in your world? It's pretty cold up there in Utah. Oh, you are still muted.
Today was beautiful. Took a long walk. My husband just had knee replacement surgery, so that was about 3 weeks ago. So he walked a good mile today. So that was
good.
Good. Yeah, we're going in the right direction.
So good too. I also squeezed in a walk today. We saw a cardinal and a little fuzzy brown bunny. So it was a very nice nature filled and didn't even need a sweater. So that was super great. Mm-hmm. And Lauren, what have you been up to?
This, that, and everything. It's been lovely here in Houston too. I was going to take a walk today, but I decided to take a nap instead.
Well, there you go.
I felt like a nap was definitely the right call today. So that was how I recovered from my day's adventures, was with a nap.
You're my kind of woman.
So did I. There you go. We are just all in sync here. Yeah, I was in the back in the lanai, and I just sort of went and lost consciousness for a while and came to. And so between all that, hopefully we've got something to offer tonight on Tact. We're all well rested. So we're going to be talking as a good example of Tact. We thought we'd talk about Priscilla and how we know she's a good example of being kind and tactful. And so I thought it might be interesting to just kind of throw out some of the other scriptures where she's mentioned, so we kind of know a little bit more about who we're going to bring out as a good example of this. And she was a sister in Christ that sailed from Syria with Paul to Ephesus in Acts 18:19, where he left them, her and her husband. This woman with her husband, they sent greetings through Paul to the church in Corinth in 1 Corinthians 16:19. And in Romans 16:3, Paul referred to her and her husband as my co-worker in Christ Jesus. So there is a commendation there. I guess her more formal name was Prisca, which means ancient, or venerable, which is like honorable or, well respected. She lived during the 1st century AD and was a Jewish Christian. So Priscilla and her husband Aquila, they were tent makers by trade, a profession that they shared with Paul. And they were actually expelled from Rome by an edict of Emperor Claudius and settled in Corinth. And that's where they had met Paul. And so they were both instrumental in the early church, hosting a house church and instructing, as we're going to learn here, Apollos, who was an eloquent preacher. And so we'll see what happens here then in Acts chapter 18. And so, Lauren, did you have that Acts 18 starting in verse 24 through 28? Thank you.
I sure do. Now, a Jew named Apollos, a native of Alexandria, came to Ephesus. He was an eloquent man, competent in the scriptures. He had been instructed in the way of the Lord, and being fervent in spirit, He spoke and taught accurately the things concerning Jesus, though he knew only the baptism of John. He began to speak boldly in the synagogue, but when Priscilla and Aquila heard him, they took him aside and explained to him the way of God more accurately. And when he wished to cross to Achaia, the brothers encouraged him and wrote to the disciples to welcome him. When he arrived, he greatly helped those who through grace had believed, for he powerfully refuted the Jews in public, showing by the scriptures that the Christ was Jesus.
Mm-hmm. So I'd love to hear you guys' observations first on this. What are your thoughts there, Lauren?
I love it. I love this story.
Mm-hmm.
I love the empowerment that we see in Priscilla here, because she does not sit back and say, well, one of the men will take care of this. She steps up and she says, good job, but there's more that you need to know. And I know it, so I'm going to share it with you. And I love that spirit of instruction that we see in Priscilla.
Absolutely. What were your thoughts, Robin?
Well, and the question was, how is she a good example of being kind? And I took that first. And, in Romans 16:3-4, it says that they risked their lives for Paul. There's no greater love or kindness than to lay down your life and to risk something for someone else. And it also says that the church met in their home. So that was a hospitality, which is a kindness. So she was a kind-hearted woman, but yet she wasn't a doormat. Sometimes we equate gentleness and kindness with not speaking up. But like Lauren eloquently said, she absolutely did speak up. But what I love about it is that they didn't immediately while he was talking, I'm imagining, stop him. It said that they took him aside. And I think that is a key element of tact. It should be done privately when at all possible.
Yes. And when you see how he responds to it, maybe part of the reason was because he felt like he'd been respected and not necessarily humiliated in front of the people that he was teaching. And because he goes out of this conversation, let's see, in 27, and when let's see, I have so many comments in between the Bible part of it that I can't tell the difference. But
we can tell that it's effective. We can tell that their instruction is effective.
Yes.
Because he goes and he starts teaching better what he's learned. He doesn't get defensive. He doesn't push back. He doesn't say, no, I'm right, you're wrong. Yes. And so something in what they were doing was effective. And I think it's the tact.
Thank you. Yes, that is the fact that he's still on fire for God, the fact that he feels motivated. And their brethren are very encouraging him and, go for it. Now you know the full counsel of God. So this turns out great. It's this great example of how we can honor each other in the course of either correcting or just giving additional information, also in receiving. So we thought we would talk about what are some other verses on the topic and what are the key elements necessary to be tactful. So I guess what verses did you guys, Robin, did you have a verse that you thought really spoke well to this topic tonight?
Well, actually I had several.
Oh, good.
Obviously, Ephesians 4:15 tells us to speak the truth in love. Motive is everything. Their motive was for the gospel to be spread. Her motive was to help somebody be a more effectual spreader of the gospel.
Yes.
Motive is huge. And do we love this person? Do we really have love for this person that we are needing to be tactful with? Also, we are told in 1 Thessalonians 5:14 to warn the idle, comfort the discouraged, help the weak. Those are all things that require us to act and to say, not to sit back but to be like Priscilla and Aquila and to speak up.
Mm-hmm.
Those are commands
Mm-hmm.
we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And for a lot of us, we don't like confrontation. Mm-hmm. And so we see that idea of having to speak to someone about something that's a hard truth or something challenging. Mm-hmm. We want to shy away from that. Well, we don't want to hurt their feelings, but we're commanded to do those things. And then in Proverbs 16:21, it talks about one that has a wise heart is discerning, issuing forth pleasant speech, which increases learning. So I believe in tact, we have to approach the situation with wisdom and discernment, which obviously come from God and from, asking him to help us with that, and be very discerning about what we say and how we do it. But what I saw out of some of these verses is that there's 3 elements of tact. The first is wisdom and discernment.
Okay.
The second is you've got to have compassion and empathy. And obviously Priscilla and Aquila did, because the walls didn't go up with Apollos. He accepted what they said lovingly. So they must have shown their love and care for him. And the third is that element of encouragement or sometimes admonishment. And we also see, like you guys already said, Apollos left there on fire.
Yes.
And so he was obviously encouraged. So those are the 3 aspects of when we have to speak to someone and be tactful. And it requires a lot of prayer and thinking. It's not just something you just open your mouth and go for, at least not me.
Same here. And I love your, especially your initial point about how love really, if your motivation is love, then that is going to make you care more about how it comes out. And you're more likely to get a good result. And if it's a correction, you love them enough to speak the hard truth. And so I can see how those 3 elements of that play into being tactful, that they all kind of are interwoven together, motivating the others and such. So, Lauren, what were your verses and your ideas on this?
Well, I also went to Proverbs, but I went to Proverbs 25 in verses 11 and 12. A word spoken at the right time is like gold apples in silver settings. A wise correction to a receptive ear is like a gold ring or an ornament of gold. And I think this builds on what Robin was just talking about. We are commanded to teach and to correct. When we see error, we are commanded to help people find the better way.
Yeah.
It's more than just, I have to, I'm commanded. When we do, there is such benefit. There is such benefit to speaking tactfully, but speaking still, but doing it tactfully and letting that be received well. Yes. Because when it is received well, it's an adornment. It's that gold ring. It makes everyone more beautiful.
Yes.
When we can encourage people to do the right thing and do it tactfully so that they don't get defensive. And I love the story. I always look for stories and characters in the Bible, because that's how I learn. I learned by watching what someone else does and learning from their example. And so I went to the story of Abigail. When Nabal does not behave with tact toward David. And Abigail comes in 1 Samuel 25. She comes to David and she smooths it over and she says what needs to be said. She doesn't shy away from the truth, but she smooths things over and she behaves with tact. And David praises her for that. Yeah. David has such strong words of, lady, you saved lives today, because I was getting ready to come in here and kill some folks.
Yeah.
And you came and saved the day just by coming and feeding him and being kind. That I think sometimes we get all worked up about, oh, I have to correct this person and it's going to be this huge thing and it's going to ruin a relationship.
Oh,
But it doesn't have to be that way. It can look smooth and gentle and kind
Yes.
and can save lives and save souls when we do it
Mhm.
right.
You know, I have an example also from Daniel
Oh.
when he had to tell Nebuchadnezzar the meaning of the dream. And I think tact is all over this.
Mm.
I won't take the time to read it, but it's in Daniel 4:18 through 26. And when Nebuchadnezzar says, none of my people can interpret the dream. I'm sorry, there's this line and I'm trying to not be in
Oh,
it.
I see.
So Daniel says at the very beginning, he says, this is what we need to do when we're having to do this hard thing. He compliments him. He says, and makes him feel okay. He says, my Lord, may the dream apply to those who hate you. May you not be afraid of this dream. So he's kind of like, calm down. It's going to be okay. I mean, and so leading with positive affirmation, leading with, you know, I mean, I can imagine, this is just totally imagination with Priscilla and Aquila. Apollos, you're such an eloquent speaker. Apollos, you're going to do such good for the Lord. In other words, we've got to set that tone first so the person isn't defensive, which is what he did. And then he goes on and he says that he was wise in verses 18. Nebuchadnezzar says, you have a spirit of the holy God within you. And then in Daniel 10:12, it is said that that Daniel determined or purposed to know and follow God. And discernment comes from that. So he was wise and discerning. He had compassion. He led with a positive. And he also admonished, because he said, this is what's going to happen to you. This is about you. And unless you, he says, separate yourself from your sins by doing what's right. And then he ends with a positive. Perhaps then there will be an extension of your prosperity. So there's a sandwich here.
I see.
And the sandwich is, say something in the beginning that is a good thing about this person or what they've done or not done or whatever. And end with that positive pat on the back. But in the middle, don't forget to speak that truth. I put Abigail down too. So I totally agree with you about Abigail. But tact is, it's not just saying a hard truth. It's how it's packaged.
Totally. And all of the examples that you both have shared really bring out really living examples of Colossians 4:6. Your speech must always be with grace, as though seasoned with salt, so that you will know how you should respond to each person. As well as Ephesians 4:29, let no unwholesome word proceed from your mouth, but only such a word as is good for edification, according to the need of the moment, so that it will give grace. So that's just sort of summarizes all of those stories that you guys shared within the scriptures. So yeah, being tactful is a form of kindness, and we're being tactful when we're expressing ourselves in a way that's considerate and delicate and diplomatic with others' feelings and ideas. So, and as you were bringing out, Robin, about the sandwich and how you say something at the beginning that really builds a rapport, and then you say the hard thing, and then you end it with something that again builds a rapport. I happened to bump into, as I was studying for this list of phrases that do just that. So here they are. How do you think that went? And Isla, I know you're in the background listening right now. Is this not our relationship, like our conversations all the time? How do you think that went? I wasn't aware of this. Tell me more. I want to understand. So imagine these things like within a conflict, right? I'm all ears. What can I do to help? I know what you're talking about. Thank you for your candor. I appreciate your feedback. That was my fault. What can I do differently? I trust your judgment. What can we do to change the situation? I am with you on that. Let's see what we can do to make sure this doesn't happen again. I recognize your efforts and hard work. I couldn't have done it without you. I sense you're feeling emotional about this topic. Is that right? How can I support you? So you can tell this list is like from all kinds of different situations, but if you can say something humble, right? If you can say something humble, if that's appropriate, and then approach whatever, if it's a conflict or if it's something that has gone sideways and everybody's emotions are flaring. So that brings us, share a time when you witnessed the art of tact used to resolve a serious situation. So before the program, Robin, you were talking about, speaking of emotions flaring and, you know, everybody getting sensitive, you had brought up like around COVID that you saw a very good example of the people around you using tact.
Yes. As we all experienced, COVID brought about that everybody had an opinion and everybody's opinion was right. And so how do you make peace with that in church when this isn't doctrinal stuff?
And it's emotionally charged because it's like, we don't know if it's life or death.
And you're going to make me wear a mask. And what do you mean you're not going to take the vaccine? Or why did you get the vaccine? You don't want to relive any of that.
Yeah.
But I noticed that a lady was very upset that she ran into a man at the grocery store and he was not coming to church, but he was at the grocery store.
Okay.
And she was very upset about that. And she kind of let him have it at the grocery store, according to her and him. And then she called my husband up. She was a single woman, a widow. And then we invited her to come over. And he just praised her for who she was. And she's such a faithful servant of Jesus. And he just loved how much, that she really cares. And then he asked her, how did he say it? Something about, can you see another way to look at this? This man that you're talking about, do you know anything about him except, from church?
Mm-hmm.
No. Well, he has a very much immunocompromised situation. She didn't know that, Mm-hmm. So, and, the grocery store, you can choose, if someone's down this aisle, he just said, can you look at it from his perspective? Now, do you think he doesn't love the Lord? Do you think he's not trying to serve God? Because he was joining us through Zoom. Can you try to look at it from this other perspective?
Yeah.
And you could just tell when she first came over, she was like this, and then she began to soften.
Yes.
And she said, I just expect everybody to think like I do.
Oh, wow. That was so humble of her to say that.
It was very humble of her, but I think it was humble of her because in the beginning, my husband just really praised her for the woman of God that she was, and not, how can you,
Oh, yes.
And this man he's a faithful Christian. He's great.
Yes.
He's, within 2 or 3 months, he was back at church, but there were multiple situations like that during COVID that we witnessed. And I just learned that you don't approach, when someone comes in all guns a-blazing, you don't, you approach it to de-escalate the situation by telling them, like your word said, let me understand what your frustration is or whatever, and then praise the person, because everybody, I don't care who they are, everybody's, number one, got a soul and God loves them. And so they need to be reminded of that. So that's kind of what I saw. But just how the tact of your way's not the right way, but he didn't say it that way. He said,
Right.
you think of a different perspective, like
Yes.
you know what this person's dealing with. And
Yes.
so anyway, so that's what it was.
Well, and it sounds like it's another, are we calling it a tactful sandwich? He did another tactful sandwich where he gave her credit where credit was due. And as you were explaining the story, the tone that you were using was also de-escalating. And it sounds like that was the tone that he used. And then the rapport at the end. And it sounds like maybe he asked her a lot of questions. Do you think, and that kind of thing, right? Instead of telling her, because when we can come to our own conclusions on our own, it feels more real to us.
Yes. And you know what? Jesus, I'm doing a personal study right now where I'm looking at every single question Jesus asked and what it meant. I mean, it is like, and Jesus taught by asking questions.
Yes.
He didn't give answers. He gave questions.
Yes.
And that's just huge. It's something that, I need to model more in my life. So
it is a great teaching approach because we really do need to solve things, figure things out when we're on our own and Jesus isn't there, in person. And I mean, like, we need to think through our things. And I think that's a great thing, especially even for parenting, right? To ask the right questions so that they can start asking, so that they can start putting their puzzles together of their life.
Mm-hmm.
I had bumped into just this week. I was kind of racking my brain. I asked these questions and I'm like, I have no idea how I'm going to answer this. But just in time, I ran into this, thanks to Heather Ladd, who sends me amazing, encouraging videos. I ran into this video of Isabel Brown. She's a thought leader in Gen Z, and she has a lot of videos on PragerU, but she often will go to college campuses to talk to young people about all kinds of issues. But she specifically mentioned, and maybe I may put this video in the comments section of the Facebook post when this pre-record comes out. But as she's approaching, I love her approach to the LGBTQ community. It's extremely tactful, I think very useful in our culture. And here's how she put it, quote, I try to create an opportunity to speak to those people directly because I have found on campus and digitally more often than not, those people saying crazy things on the internet don't have a single person in their life. Not one who is willing to confront them with a different idea by speaking the truth in love, by saying, quote, I care about you. I see that you're hurting. I see that you're having all kinds of crazy stuff going on in your life. Let's think about our solution for you together. Here's why this idea or this pathway or this value might be more beneficial for your life moving forward, unquote. And then she also will mention in the course of the conversation that she has no ill will toward them. So I thought that I was kind of picturing myself as the recipient of that kind of approach. She sounds like she's on their side in terms of in their corner in terms of well-being, and kind of putting an olive branch out there of like, let's have a conversation. We may even be able to come up with something that's going to add more value to your life moving forward. So I loved that.
I think too, part of that approach is also the willingness to learn and the willingness to be wrong in some aspects. As you were reading that list of conversation opener-uppers,
yes,
it was reminding me of conversations that I had with Matt when we would get in the car after church, and he would say, "So what do you think of my sermon?" And my standard response, and it became a joke eventually, my standard response was, "Well, what did you think about it?" and it became shorthand for that wasn't my favorite. Even when that wasn't what I meant.
Yeah.
There were times when I would come out of church and go, I really didn't like the way you handled that. I really didn't like the way you talked about that. But if I say, what did you think about it? That gives me the opportunity to learn and to be wrong. And for him to say, well, I wasn't sure how I felt about this, but then I learned this and I decided to approach it this way because,
Oh,
and it lets me have, the conversation between the woman who had lit up the guy who wasn't coming to church.
uh-huh.
Maybe the elder in question had some things to learn about that woman too.
Uh-huh.
That in every conversation, when we go in with tact, we are able to come at it from an educate me, help me
Yes.
understand better kind of
Yeah.
perspective.
Yes. Isn't that the truth? Because we do have something we can learn from everybody. We really do.
Always.
If you listen for it. Yes. And I loved, Lauren, when we had our special little lunch, the four of us and a couple of crazy kids who joined.
Very crazy.
I love how Matt talked about how he valued your feedback. Like that was his thing. Like I remember him saying something like, I don't write a single thing till she has looked it over. And I love the rapport in your relationship, but I'm sure it called for you. It's tricky with husbands, isn't it? Because you want them to go into their work with 100% confidence. And it's like, how do you, but it seems to me that you guys had a very open communication in terms of you could tell the truth, but
even with that, it's always still important to be tactful and
yes.
to say the truth carefully.
Yes. We don't want to discourage. We want everyone leaving that conversation both encouraged and informed. So that's the situation. Let's see, Sarah. Oh, we got one more thing we're going to talk about here. Oh, we are sitting pretty in time right now. So let's talk about some suggestions of how to deal with an awkward situation tactfully. There was a really funny one that I thought I'd just start with here that I loved. If someone gives you an ugly sweater, say, thanks so much for the present. I'm touched that you thought of me. I love that one. It's like, we're not going to talk about the sweater. Just like, I'm so touched that you thought of me. And so, yeah, so that's the approach of walking a wide circle around. Like, they don't need to know how you feel about the sweater. But on a more serious note, pray to God to give you the words and to open the heart of the recipient. I think that's square A.
It's huge.
It's huge. If you're not sure that things are as bad as they appear, like make no assumptions, but ask, are you okay? Which kind of communicates, I think, I want you to be okay. And what I'm about to say may be difficult to hear, but it's kind of couched, it's sandwiched there. Like, I want things to be okay with you, but sometimes things are okay and we have misread something and we're like, oh, good. I thought XYZ, So even before you get into something, make sure you know what you're about to get into, because it'd be bad you wouldn't want to hurt a relationship for nothing, and there was nothing, and now they're like, I can't believe you would think that of me or whatever. So know what you're dealing with. Think about how you would like to be approached. If it was switched, what approach would make you the most receptive? That's not to say that it always translates, but I think it gives you a general idea. What do you guys, Robin, what were some of your thoughts here?
Well, I kind of went back to some of the examples that we looked at, and obviously time and place. And I've noticed, I don't know what generation they are. I get Z and X and I get them all mixed up. All I know is I'm a boomer, but
that's all you need to know, Robin.
That's all I know. But I do know that oftentimes they like to resolve things through text. And one time I got a long text and I immediately said, can we meet in person? I can't do this through text. We need to look in each other's eyes and see each other's heart and emotions and, and so time and place. And I think asking the other person often, like, is this a good time? I really, I have something I would like to talk to you about. Is this a good time for you, or something like that? Just Priscilla and Aquila took them aside.
Yeah.
Nice. And then from Daniel's example, that tact sandwich.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that that's huge. And
Yes, it's huge.
I was a public school teacher for years and dealt with junior high and high school kids and parents. And, you don't tell Johnny's parents that he's just the most horrible kid you've ever had in your class.
Mm-hmm.
So you lead with something positive. Boy, he has a lot of energy, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so I just think that, and then you show respect. Even though Nebuchadnezzar was not good, Daniel showed him honor. He showed him respect for that position of king. And I think everyone needs to feel valued and validated. And that's the worst thing you can do, is not show them value or validation. Even if what they're doing is not right, you still have to show them honor as someone who has a soul that God loves.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think one of you mentioned it about listening. Listen more than we talk, and ask those questions. Like Cindy, those things you read previously, almost all of those were questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you also mentioned this, but speak the truth, seeking to encourage, not to threaten or accuse. Threatening words involve you and never and always, whereas encouraging words sound much, much, much different. And I'm reminded in John 1:14, Jesus came full of two things: truth and grace.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we need to remember the balance with truth and grace when we're having the difficult conversations.
Yes. Beautiful pairing. Amen, sister. Lauren, what are your thoughts on this?
So the first place I went was to 1 Corinthians 13.
Oh.
And I think one of the most important pieces to me is that love believes all things. And to me, that says we have to give people the benefit of the doubt.
Yes.
And we kind of touched on this several times already this evening, but when you are going into a situation where tact is required, every step of the way, give the benefit of the doubt, hope that you're wrong.
Yes.
About the things that you believe the other person needs to be corrected about.
Yes.
And if you are proven wrong, be really happy and excited about that.
Yes.
Like, be so glad that you don't have to correct them and that they were right. Because it's easy to go into a confrontation like that and be defensive on our side too.
Right.
And say, I'm right. And I'm going to prove to you that you're doing it wrong. And that escalation doesn't help anybody or anything. The other big thing that I thought of, and this is a little controversial, but that's what I do.
It is what you do.
It is. In 1 Corinthians 6 and verse 7, Paul says, as it is, to have legal disputes against one another is already a defeat for you. Why not rather be wronged? Why not rather be cheated? And I think the skill of bearing with, when it's not a sin, when it's just, I don't like what you're doing. I don't like the way that you're doing that. The skill of bearing with brethren is a woefully underdeveloped one.
Amen.
And so sometimes we need to be willing to say, I'm not going to push it. I'm going to let this one go.
Yes.
And I am in the right. Yes, they were tacky to me. Yes, they did me wrong. But I'm just going to let it go.
Yes.
And I'm not going to worry about it. And I think the first step of tact is learning when to just not say anything at all.
Yes.
Not how to say it tactfully, when to just let them be wrong.
Okay. Yes.
And be okay with it. And that is so hard. That is so hard. But I forget the situation. I was in a Bible class recently, and we were reading No, it was before communion a couple of weeks ago. We were reading about Jesus being slandered on the cross and just before the cross, and all of these people saying all of these terrible, incorrect things to and about him. And boy, if that didn't get my back up, no, you're wrong. And I'm going to prove to you that you're wrong. And you're going to be so sad that you woke up and were wrong today. Right? Like, I'm going to shut this wrongness down. And Jesus doesn't say a word.
Yes.
He just lets it go.
Yes.
And it's not that makes them right. It's that it's not worth doing this. It's not worth the relationship damage. It's not worth the confrontation that we're going to have over this. I would rather just be wronged. I would rather just be cheated and let us keep the relationship. And that's a difficult thing to judge. When is it time to do that versus when is it time to stand up and say something?
Yes.
But I'm afraid sometimes we choose standing up and saying something when we ought to choose to remain silent instead.
Yes, that's a very good point. Very good point. Robin, did you have something you wanted to reply on that?
I couldn't agree with that more. And that's one of the characteristics of love. It doesn't take into account wrong suffered. And it bears all things, but that's a very essential quality. Lauren, you will find out as your children grow and get married and have children of their own, that you have to let each family and each marriage and each way they raise children, you have to let that, unless they come to you, unless you see out and out sin.
Right.
But the beauty of not saying something sometimes is that allows for growth. Because oftentimes it takes a while for us to figure things out and to grow. And if someone's constantly pointing out to me that I have broccoli in my teeth all the time, spiritual teeth, so to speak, that's, I don't know. So there is a fine line. We know that we are commanded to, from 1 Thessalonians 5:14, to encourage the weak, to admonish. We know that we're supposed to do that. But again, there's wisdom and discernment. When do you let go and when do you step up? So I'm really thankful you brought that up. It's a very, very valid point.
Well, and on a basic level, I think as we, with Apollos being corrected, if there's something at stake, like he's not going to be speaking all of the truth unless I say something, obviously. And then obviously, if it's kind of something about you that's totally wrong, that can be let go. But it's that in-between stuff that can be really, really tricky, where it would benefit them to really go to war on it. But yeah, would it benefit them enough to make enough of a difference? And it's a way, Lauren, of self-denial, isn't it? I think it's a thing of it's a good exercise in not putting yourself first. To defend yourself always. And sometimes the truth will surface on its own, and then how much better it is that they knew that you opted to not push it when you could have. And so I think that is a good reflection and a good example. A few of the thoughts that I had as we're talking about how to deal with awkward situations tactfully. If it's a critical conversation, like an intervention for someone who is in self-destruction mode, I would advise take the time to write and organize your thoughts so that you can choose your words carefully. This is, sometimes those are like life and death. Think of concrete, biblically relevant reasons why another course of action would be better for them. Take the time to think that through. If you're telling someone something important, face them and look them in the eye. I think that was your point, Robin. Instead of interrupting someone, give them your full attention until they're finished talking. To show you're not coming from a holier than thou stance, you could share with the recipient a time when you found yourself in a similar situation. That would be like your sandwich. That would be a good top bun for your sandwich. This happened to me. in situations where you're not like an authority figure in their life, like a boss or a parent or whatever, if you have to confront a friend or a coworker to soften their heart, here's what I do. And I know this is kind of, I don't know. I know might sound kind of weird to people, but I show my own vulnerability in these situations by confessing how my own insecure feelings about even having to have the conversation. So this is like with a friend. And so I'll start with something like, listen, this is maybe my least favorite thing to do, maybe in the whole wide world, because I'm scared that you're not going to take it the right way. But I feel like I should offer something I know is going to help you if you're open to it. And that it would not serve you well if I just put myself first by not bringing it up. Like I feel a moral obligation to offer some clarity. So if I confess, I find if I confess like, this is so hard for me, then there's kind of maybe a softening for them, where they know that I'm not like really enjoying correcting, if they know how, and because the whole thing's true. I hate doing it, but I often feel like if there's a moral obligation for something. So I think if you show your vulnerability like that, that can soften and maybe open a heart to wisdom. I think you guys brought up timing, Proverbs 27:14. Whoever blesses his neighbor with a loud voice rising early in the morning will be counted as a cursing. So asking people how they're doing before jumping in to deliver some bad news, that might be a good idea. That you could maybe share it at a later time. If they're already like presently overwhelmed, that would be tactful. If you have some really big news and you're so excited and everything, but it's like somebody else's night to shine, it's their birthday, like maybe you wait till next weekend, instead of, it's kind of like their night. So maybe that would be like the tactful thing to do. I've got a few others, but anything else that you ladies had to add here? No? All right. Well, I had a few that were related to gossip, which always I think is very helpful for Christian women. We hang out a lot together. We talk. Gossip's tricky because we're always so open with our own stuff a lot of times with the sisters we're closest with. And then we need to not be open with everybody else's stuff. And so some really great ideas that I had bumped into in my getting ready for this conversation about gossip. Like, here's some things that you could say. You could say, I'm sorry you heard that about her. You'll be glad to know that when I spoke to her, she said it was just a rumor about this or that. That's one thing you could say. You could say, I never met her, so I wouldn't have a clue about her drinking habits. You could say, if they're like putting somebody down, yeah, she runs late a lot, but boy, does she, when she does more than her fair share when she finally shows up. Or like you kind of like defend the person. Yeah. Oh, look at this. Couch a correction with something positive so the person sees that you care about her. There we are, Robin.
Sandwich.
There's all kinds of good things that we can say. If you want to, you're going to not go out there asking you, would you like to come do this or that? Thank you so much for thinking of me. Unfortunately, I'm still wrapping up some projects and won't be able to come. So I guess just putting the thought in there, and just these little kindnesses so that people know she loves me. She's just busy, and oh, what do you have? And you could even offer like, hey, I'd love to hang out with you, but would next Friday would work better for me, or that kind of thing. So they don't think like, oh, she doesn't like to spend time with me. So that kind of thing. And that is about all that I have here. And so if you guys have anything else you want to say, we have a minute for that. If not, we will say good night. All right. Looks like we're ready to say good night. Good night.
Good night.
See you later.